It's finally here. We are getting the 18-issue Spider-Man X-Men extravaganza, probably the least anticipated Spider-Man event in Marvel comic books history. And here to talk about Dark Web #1 is Doc. How you doing, Doc?
Better that I'm not reading this comic book anymore, but I'm all right.
So this isn't the worst comic book of all time, Doc.
No.
It's illustrated very well. And it's not the most boring generic thing, but it does have some issues with filler that we'll get to here in a few seconds. But we got to talk about the art from Adam Kubert. The only thing I had an issue with on this, actually there's two things. Number one, Maddie Pryor has a serious case of man face whenever she's trying to be intimidating. And number two, there's so much talking with a lack of action that you kind of wasted an amazing comic book artist here.
I had a couple other objections. There was a couple of spots where Adam looked like he was really kind of phoning it in. There was also that really inexplicable choice to use a double page spread for just Spider-Man sitting up on top of a roof looking down at Rockefeller Center. It was really kind of bland, but for the most part, the art was fine. It was very serviceable. It was just, I really wish Adam would have been able to had the opportunity to do a lot more action here.
There's a lot of filler. Let's talk about the filler first. First off, they're just reaffirming plot points that have taken place within the last 18 months of Marvel Comics, but they're using many, many, many pages to do that. There's a birthday party for the slain Harry Osborne, and we get reminded that Peter and MJ are not together and that she has some kids now, and that Peter and Norman Osborn have a little beef, but they're somewhat friends now, and they waste like probably 10 pages in this comic book just telling you stuff that you already know.
Yeah, there was like 8 to 10 pages there that could have been condensed down to like 4 panels. It could have been seriously condensed. However they did it, still got the point across, and it wouldn't have been wasting so much goddamn panel real estate just to do nothing except for apparently get a bunch of people in the same room and make Norman not be there for his own kids' party.
This is the first issue of a big 18-issue crossover event. You can already see they don't have 18 issues of story to actually tell, so there's going to be plenty of filler. The big problem with this comic book, besides all the filler, are the villains here. Apparently, Madeline Pryor and Chasm have decided, because they have something in common, they're both clones of heroes, that they're going to take over New York City. Why?
Maybe Maddie's doing that because she needs something from the X-Men's treehouse, but she's not allowed to go there with ill intent. So she teamed up to send Ben, or maybe fucking Venom, to collect it, because that's kind of the gist of what I thought they were doing. Now,
but Ben Reilly has a motivation in this comic book, and she's doing nothing to help him out.
Yeah,
she's doing her bidding, and that makes no sense whatsoever. He shouldn't be like her lackey in this.
Initially, whenever they were talking and kind of like establishing where they were going, I thought it was kind of like they were going for like a strangers on a train kind of vibe. You go deal with my thing, I'll deal with your thing. That way we both get plausible deniability and we can blah, blah, blah. Maddie starts doing that, but I guess sort of attacking Peter, like actual Spider-Man, to capture him for Ben so that he can, I don't know, collect memories or some shit.
That part is mentioned when Chasm goes up and meets with Norman Osborn, who's now reformed. And he tells him, I've lost my memories. Peter stole them and he's mad. So he wants to regain his memories, Doc. How would taking over New York City do that?
I haven't the slightest goddamn clue. Okay, Zeb Wells is an okay writer. Maybe he'll find a way to make it make sense in future issues. But as it stands right now, this just seems hey, let's redo the original Inferno, but call it something else. We'll have Ben and Venom as the stand-ins for, I keep wanting to say Nastreth, but it's not him, from Inferno. Just have them as the stand-ins for them, except for those characters sucked and they didn't have a good arc.
Another one of the issues in here, you mentioned Venom, because he's a bad guy in here. Apparently, he has decided to work with Maddie and Chasm because they have promised to get his boy back to him. And he's reverted back to being like 1990s Venom. Madeline Pryor has also reverted back to being like 1990s Madeline Pryor. And Ben Reilly has reverted back to being 1990s Ben Reilly. They've regressed all the characters to make them fit into this stupid story.
Yes, sort of. Venom starts out perfectly normal, but as soon as he gets to New York, he's screaming about eating Spider-Man's brains. And I'm like, okay, all right, cool. I mean, I like that Venom, like the ASM 300s era Venom. I like that Venom. But at the same time, it seemed really jarring. And I guess maybe it's just because he came through the portal. I can't quite figure out what the hell was going on with that.
They've been leading up to this event for like a year now, Doc. It feels like they could have laid the groundwork to make all this stuff make sense.
But were they really leading up to it? They were doing plot stuff, and then they just randomly decided to slap them all together for this story and like converge their plots with no real foreshadowing that their plots would be converged in any way, shape, or form, except for the fact that they announced it. It seems kind of wonky that they just decide, hey, we need a way to make these all three storylines kind of converge in a way that apparently time travels to 1990 and doesn't make any goddamn sense.
Who would have thought this, Doc? When they decided to make Madeline Pryor the new, like, King of Limbo or whatever, we said this makes no sense. Nobody in the Marvel Universe would allow that to happen. Magic certainly would never give up that power and give it over to Madeline Pryor because they know the character is inherently evil. Guess what? She's evil now, Doc, and she's playing her evil organ, which makes inanimate objects across New York City just start eating people.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, the fact that Magic didn't have any real suspicions about it, and then even whenever she admits, oh, I guess I was wrong, doesn't really do anything. Just kind of stands there and goes, oops.
Did you like how the X-Men immediately knew, with no information or clues or whatever, that this was Madeline Pryor?
I guess they could probably jump to that conclusion. I don't think anybody else has turned horse carriages and mailboxes and Christmas trees into giant man-eating monsters before, so...
But Jean Grey senses no evidence that Madeline Pryor is doing anything, but they know that she is.
That just doesn't make any goddamn sense. Like...
Not much about this does make sense. Like I said, it's not terrible. If you read this, you're not going to go away mad like I did when I read Batman 130 this week. But it's not exactly exciting. And, it's just plot contrivance after plot contrivance. The only part about the book that I truly liked is when J. Jonah Jameson is talking to this kid, and he's talking about, hey, Tombstone used to be mean to you. I heard you're dating his daughter. And then the kid's like, actually, we're engaged. And he goes, good job. That'll show him. He's like, hey, go nail Tombstone's daughter. That'll get even. I thought that was funny. Like, that was a good moment.
It was not bad. I kind of enjoyed that. Now, that being said, like the problem that I had with this comic, it's a combination of a couple of things. Like, they immediately jump to the conclusion of the whole Maddie thing. They don't really explain plot-wise why all three of those, disparate plots from their individual books came together. They just kind of all shove it through in a couple of pages and kind of force it in there. Yet at the same time, they waste, as we talked about, like 8 or 10 pages on just random filler shit. There's a really interesting and good story here. All you had to do was give the appropriate amount of page real estate to the important parts of the story instead of using some of it for filler and then rushing through other parts of it. There was no degree of pacing here. That being said, you're right. Not a bad book. I'll
give it like a 6 out of 10, 3 out of 5, something like that.
Yeah, I'd say probably about the same. The only problem is they still haven't gotten me to give a shit.
Well, yeah, because this is the most unanticipated, the least anticipated Spider-Man event really in history. Certainly with what we've seen out of the X-Men in the last few years, there's been less anticipated X-Men events, but this is an X-Men Spider-Man crossover event. It should feel like a big deal, and it does not feel like a big deal. It feels like a desperate cash grab where they decided to throw a bunch of stuff together because they needed an event that started this month.
It doesn't feel like an event. It doesn't really feel like a crossover. It feels like one of those random issues in the 90s where somebody would guest star.
Very frustrated about the 2023 Marvel Comics event lineup. It looks terrible, and after reading the first issue of Dark Web, I think I was right on the money with this one. If you don't see the video here, there's also a link in the video description.